Under the glow of flickering airport lights, a poor mechanic crossed paths with a shivering stranger, and one old jacket would change both of their lives. The cold punched through Jack Bennett's jacket the second he stepped onto the arrivals floor at O'Hare. Thanksgiving Eve was always a zoo, but this year it seemed worse. People dragging overstuffed bags, security barking orders, little kids weaving through the crowds like minnows. Jack tightened his grip on the handle of his tool bag, shifting the weight to his good shoulder. Somewhere deep in his jacket pocket, a folded photo brushed against his ribs. Charlie's grin, still bright after all these hard months apart. Jack touched the pocket briefly, a silent promise tightening in his chest. He would find a way back to him. Somehow, the job that was supposed to bring him here had vanished. The app message came through just as he pulled into the airport lot. Client canceled. No compensation. Jack stared at the screen a long moment before slipping it away. He was down to his last tank of gas, and the money left wouldn't even cover parking if he stayed long. He sighed, rubbing a hand over his jaw, and wandered toward gate 14, thinking maybe, just maybe, he'd catch another ride if someone looked desperate enough. The smell of roasting pretzels drifted through the air, mixing with the crisp scent of snow. Overhead, announcements crackled, unintelligible, as families pressed together, calling greetings over the din. Jack leaned against a cold metal support beam, watching without really seeing, until a blur of movement caught his eye. She was standing just beyond the automatic doors, a slender woman in a business skirt and heels, arms wrapped tight around herself. Her hair was damp with snow sticking to her temples. No coat, no scarf, nothing but a thin blouse that the wind clawed through. She didn't look up. She just stood there, trembling. Jack shifted, heart squeezing uncomfortably. Surely someone would notice. Surely someone would help. People bustled past her without a glance, their faces set toward holiday dinners, waiting at the other end of their journeys. Jack glanced down at his jacket, threadbare, patched at the elbows, barely enough for himself. He could stay out of this, pretend he hadn't seen, but he couldn't. His boots scuffed the floor as he pushed off the beam. He moved slowly, like approaching a wild animal, not wanting to startle her. Up close, he could see the tightness in her jaw, the fine tremble in her fingers. Without a word, Jack shrugged out of his jacket and held it out to her. For a moment, she just stared, confused, hesitant. Then, realizing he meant it, she took the jacket with a small, shaky gasp, pulling it around herself in one swift motion. Jack caught the faint scent of expensive perfume beneath the raw smell of cold. He smiled. Just a small thing, worn at the edges but sincere. "Happy Thanksgiving, ma'am," he said, voice rough with the cold and maybe something else. Before she could answer, he turned away, merging into the endless current of travelers, his tool bag bumping against his knee, his boots silent on the polished floor. Ellie stands motionless, wrapped in the jacket's worn comfort, watching the stranger disappear into the snowy night. Ellie clutched the jacket closer, unaware that a crumpled repair receipt tucked inside held the only clue to the man's identity. The penthouse door clicked shut behind her, muffling the city's distant hum and leaving only silence. Snow from her heels melted onto the pristine marble floor, tiny puddles she didn't notice. The jacket smelled faintly of motor oil and soap, a jarring contrast to the polished coldness around her. She moved stiffly through the vast living room, its high ceilings and glass walls designed to impress but failing to comfort. Without thinking, Ellie hugged the jacket tighter, feeling the rough texture under her fingertips. She stopped by the console table, letting her handbag slip from her shoulder with a soft thud. Only then did she realize how out of place the old coat looked, draped across her manicured arm, like a scar in a flawless painting. Peeling it off slowly, she shook out the creases and caught sight of something tucked inside. Curious, she reached into the inner pocket and pulled out a crumpled, stained piece of paper. It took a second for her eyes to focus on the faded print. Bennett Auto Repair, the heading read, with an address scribbled hastily below. Ellie frowned, heart tightening. She sat down heavily on the nearest armchair, the paper trembling slightly in her hand. The name meant nothing to her, but the thought of that man, Jack maybe, lingered stubbornly. She closed her eyes for a moment, and unbidden, memory swept her away. A cold Thanksgiving night long ago. She was 10, standing on the cracked steps of St. Agnes Church, her coat too thin, her shoes too small. She had watched families rush past, their arms full of pies and sleeping toddlers, their laughter spilling into the night. None had noticed the little girl huddled against the stone wall, except one old man who stopped, tucked a peppermint candy into her hand, and smiled. Ellie opened her eyes and looked around. Success surrounded her, floor-to-ceiling windows, art curated by expensive hands, a kitchen gleaming with unused appliances. And yet tonight, surrounded by everything she had once dreamed of, she had never felt more like that lonely little girl. The jacket lay across her lap, rough and comforting. She stared at the receipt again. It would be easy to dismiss this, to throw it away, forget the man with the tired smile and the worn jacket. It would be clean, efficient, no mess, no vulnerability. But kindness demanded more than silence. The doorbell rang. Laura Mitchell, her assistant, and increasingly her friend, entered with a takeout bag and a tired smile. She shrugged off her coat and immediately noticed the jacket and the paper in Ellie's hand. "What's this?" Laura asked, setting the food down. Ellie wordlessly handed her the receipt. Laura studied it, then raised an eyebrow. "Bennett Auto Repair," she read aloud. "You thinking of getting your brakes fixed? Or is this about the guy who loaned you his coat?" Ellie gave a thin smile. "Maybe both." Laura tilted her head, considering. "Maybe he's the one who needs fixing." The words struck deeper than Ellie expected. She thought of Jack's quiet generosity, the way he had offered his only protection against the cold without expectation or hesitation. People like that didn't just happen, and they didn't deserve to be forgotten. Laura leaned casually against the counter, waiting. Ellie ran her thumb along the faded receipt one more time. She made her decision. Ellie texted Laura, "I need a favor, quietly, no press. Find him." Not every hero wears a cape. Some wear grease-stained boots and carry years of silent heartbreak. The cold clung to Jack Bennett's jacket as he knelt by the open hood of a battered pickup, his breath curling into the frigid air. His fingers, bruised and calloused, moved with steady care despite the numbness creeping into his knuckles. Around him, the makeshift garage sagged under the weight of snow gathering along its leaky roof. Half-frozen puddles glistened underfoot, reflecting the battered metal and rusted sign that once proudly proclaimed, "Bennett Auto Repair." Jack wiped his hands on a rag and glanced toward the parking lot, where a young woman with 2 kids waited inside a rusted minivan. He didn't ask for payment. She had already handed over a plastic-wrapped plate of chocolate chip cookies, eyes apologetic, voice tight with embarrassment. Jack had only nodded, setting the cookies on the counter without a word. Sam Decker ambled over, the old security guard balancing 2 steaming paper cups in mittened hands. Jack straightened up, stretching out his stiff back as Sam offered him one. "Don't say I never bring you anything," Sam grunted, half smiling. Jack accepted the cup, grateful for the blast of warmth it offered. They stood side by side in easy silence for a moment, steam curling between them. "She's one of the good ones," Sam said finally, nodding toward the woman in the minivan. Jack gave a small grunt of agreement. "Just trying to get by," he said, voice rough. Sam studied him over the rim of his cup. "Sounds familiar." Jack looked down, the snow crunching faintly under his boots. "Yeah," he said, "too familiar." There was a weight to the words that Sam didn't press. He knew better. He knew about the engineering job Jack had once held, the house that had been sold off piece by piece, the boy Jack had fought to keep and ultimately lost to a system that said love wasn't enough without stability. "You ever think about calling him?" Sam asked, casual but not careless. Jack shook his head. "When I can offer more than a truck cab and cold dinners, maybe." Sam didn't argue. Instead, he clapped Jack's shoulder once, solid and understanding, and shuffled back toward his own post near the lot's battered entrance. Across the street, hidden behind the tinted glass of a rental car, Ellie watched. She wore no makeup, her hair tucked under a plain knit cap, a thick hoodie swallowing her frame. She had been sitting there for nearly an hour, the car heater off to avoid drawing attention. Her hands were cold, but she barely noticed. She watched the way Jack moved, efficient, careful, no wasted gestures, no self-pity in the lines of his body, just a quiet, stubborn dignity. Laura's words echoed in her mind. Sometimes giving someone a hand doesn't lift them up, it lifts you too. Ellie leaned forward, eyes narrowing. Jack had no idea anyone was watching. No idea that his small, unseen kindness at the airport had set all this in motion. He wasn't playing to an audience. He was simply living his truth, quietly, steadily, even when no one seemed to care. Her heart twisted. How many times had she hardened herself to survive, telling herself it didn't matter who fell through the cracks? How many Jack Bennetts had she passed by, too busy, too careful? The decision formed slowly, an ache turning solid in her chest. She couldn't stay in the car. She couldn't let this end as another silent kindness unnoticed. Ellie's hand trembled slightly as she pushed open the car door, the cold air slicing into her. She stepped out onto the icy pavement, her breath visible, heart hammering against her ribs. Each step toward the sagging garage felt heavier than the last. Jack, bent over a crate of tools, looked up at the sound of approaching footsteps. His eyes met hers, confusion first, then something flickering deeper, not recognition exactly, but a stirring of memory. Jack looks up, eyes meeting hers. Recognition flickers, confusion evident. Sometimes the hardest thing isn't giving kindness. It's learning how to accept it when it's offered back. The cold seeped through every crack in the walls of Jack Bennett's garage, slipping across the concrete floor, curling around rusted toolboxes and half-repaired engines. Jack stood rigid, still clutching a wrench, as the woman from the airport, the woman from his fleeting act of kindness, crossed the threshold into his world. The heavy scent of motor oil hung between them, layered over the bitter dampness of snow, melting at the edges of the garage door. Ellie Grayson paused just inside, pulling her coat tighter against the chill. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Jack's heart pounded in his chest, louder than the whistling wind outside. Somewhere deep in his mind, a voice whispered, soft, familiar, painful. His wife, long gone but never far. It's okay to let someone help you too, love. He set the wrench down slowly. His voice, when it came, was rougher than he intended. You lost? Ellie gave a small, wry smile. No, I'm exactly where I meant to be. She stepped closer, stopping a respectful distance away, as if conscious of how much space to leave. Jack's shoulders tensed instinctively, but he didn't back up. I didn't get to thank you properly, she said. At the airport. You didn't know me. You didn't owe me anything, but you gave me your coat anyway. Jack shrugged, uncomfortable. Wasn't a big deal? It was to me, Ellie said quietly. He didn't know what to say to that, so he said nothing. The air between them filled with the hum of the overhead lights and the distant clatter of wind against metal siding. Ellie reached into her bag and pulled out a thin folder, holding it out like an offering. Jack didn't take it. I run a company, she said. A big one. We're starting a new project, a community repair program, fixing up cars for families that can't afford it, teaching apprentices, real work, real pay, real benefits. Jack frowned, suspicion prickling under his skin. Sounds like charity. Ellie shook her head firmly. It's opportunity, and we need someone who knows what it's like to rebuild with their own hands. Someone who knows what it means to keep going when everything's fallen apart. He crossed his arms. Why me? She met his gaze without flinching. Because you gave your last warm thing to a stranger without hesitation. Because people like you are the heart of everything we forget to value. Jack wanted to laugh, but the sound stuck in his throat. He looked down at his boots, at the grease staining his fingers. He thought of every broken promise, every door closed in his face, every time hope had turned to ash. You don't know me, he said hoarsely. No, Ellie agreed, but I saw enough to know you matter. The words hit harder than he expected. He stared at the folder she still held out, the paper trembling slightly from her grip, or maybe the cold. Pride warred with something softer, more dangerous. A desperate, battered part of him that wanted to believe. He shook his head once sharp. "I need time," he said. Ellie nodded, relief flickering across her face. She didn't push. "Take all you need. I'll leave this here." She set the folder carefully on the nearest workbench, then turned and walked toward the door. Sam Decker stood across the lot, arms folded, watching but not interfering. Jack stayed frozen in place until the door swung shut behind her, letting in a gust of icy wind. He exhaled slowly and moved toward the bench. As he did, his hand brushed the jacket she had left behind. His old, worn jacket returned to him somehow heavier than before. Tucked inside the pocket was a folded scrap of paper. With trembling fingers, Jack pulled it out and unfolded it. In neat handwriting, it read, "You believed in me when I was invisible. Let me believe in you." While most people hurried home for turkey and pumpkin pie, Jack sat alone with a decision heavier than any snowstorm. Terminal A at O'Hare Airport buzzed with life. Travelers dragged wheeled suitcases behind them, children laughed and darted between the slow-moving crowds, and the smell of coffee and cinnamon pretzels drifted through the air. Overhead, garlands of autumn leaves and small cardboard turkeys hung from the high ceilings, swaying slightly each time the automatic doors opened to let in another gust of frigid air. Jack sat hunched on a bench near the window, his elbows on his knees, staring out at the swirling snow coating the tarmac beyond. His old jacket hung across his lap, the note Ellie had tucked inside folded carefully into his pocket. Flights blinked red with delays on the screen above him, but he wasn't here to leave. He was here to think. Around him, families reunited with laughter and tight hugs. An elderly couple kissed shyly under a dangling Happy Thanksgiving banner. A little boy tugged at his father's coat, waving a small American flag. Jack watched it all through a strange fog, feeling both closer and farther away than he had in years. He pulled his phone from his pocket and stared at the cracked screen. The number was still programmed in, though he hadn't dialed it in months. His thumb hovered over the call button, heart pounding harder than it should for such a small action. Sam's voice echoed in his memory. "Second chances don't wait forever, Jack." With a breath that felt like tearing something loose inside him, Jack pressed the call button. It rang once, twice. Jack nearly hung up. Then a voice, younger, deeper than he remembered, crackled through. "Hello?" Jack swallowed hard. "Hey, buddy, it's Dad." A long beat of silence. Then Charlie's voice, rough with surprise, and something warmer broke through. "Dad?" "Yeah." Jack cleared his throat. "Just wanted to say, Happy Thanksgiving." There was a soft hitch in the line, as if Charlie were blinking back emotion. "Happy Thanksgiving," he said back. No anger, no blame, just simple, fragile hope. They talked for barely 2 minutes. About the weather, about Charlie's classes, about nothing and everything. Jack clung to each word like a man pulling himself hand over hand across a wide, dark gulf. When they hung up, Jack sat motionless for a long time, phone still in hand. The note in his pocket seemed to burn against his side. "You believed in me when I was invisible? Let me believe in you." He thought about the man he had been, proud, careful, wary of anything that smelled like charity. He had given away a coat without expecting anything back, not because he was noble, but because it was the right thing to do. He had believed once that simple acts mattered. Maybe it was time to believe again. Outside, the snow thickened, swirling like a living thing across the tarmac. Travelers shook out their scarves, stomped their boots, hurried toward gates decorated with cheerful banners. Life moved, with or without him. Jack stood slowly, sliding the note back into his jacket pocket. His breath misted in the air as he pushed open the door to the terminal and stepped into the bitter cold. Snow bit at his cheeks, melted into his hair, but he barely felt it. He found a quiet spot against the outer wall, dug out his phone again, and dialed a number scrawled at the bottom of the folder Ellie had left him. The line rang once before a receptionist answered. Jack cleared his throat, voice hoarse from emotion and cold. "Tell her I'm ready." A battered repair shop, an old jacket, and an unexpected friendship. Sometimes that's all it takes to rebuild a life. The old hangar still smelled faintly of oil and dust, but now it was layered with the sweetness of pumpkin pie and fresh coffee. Rows of battered bicycles leaned against the walls, next to space heaters, toasters, and old lawnmowers, waiting for a second chance. Warm light spilled from strings of bare bulbs, strung haphazardly across the ceiling, chasing away the shadows that had long haunted the place. Jack Bennett stood near the front, his hands shoved into the pockets of his clean, if still well-worn jeans. His hair was neatly trimmed, his boots polished. A small podium stood before him, though he looked almost sheepish next to it. Scattered folding chairs were filled with neighbors, former clients, and strangers drawn by curiosity and goodwill. Sam Decker stood off to the side, arms folded, a proud grin splitting his weathered face. Ellie Grayson lingered near the back, letting Jack have the moment. She wore a simple navy coat, her hair down, a soft smile playing at her lips. Her presence grounded the room, though she made no move to steal attention. Jack cleared his throat, glancing down at the index card he hadn't once looked at since stepping up. He didn't need it. "Everyone deserves a second chance," he said, his voice carrying through the cavernous space. "And sometimes all you need is a warm jacket on a cold night to remind you you're still worth it." The crowd murmured in agreement, applause small but genuine. Jack nodded once, accepting it without fanfare, then stepped back. No grand speeches, no polished slogans, just truth, plain and simple. From the side, a sudden clatter of tools interrupted the moment. Charlie Bennett, taller now, lanky in a way only teenagers could be, came barreling toward Jack with an armful of wrenches and jumper cables. Jack caught the mess with a chuckle, tousling his son's hair with one rough hand. Charlie rolled his eyes but grinned, cheeks flushing with pride. It was the kind of moment Jack had once thought he'd lost forever. Small, ordinary, and absolutely everything. Ellie watched them from across the room, heart swelling in her chest. She could have stepped forward, drawn attention to herself, but she didn't. This wasn't her victory to claim. It belonged to Jack, and to everyone who needed proof that beginnings could come from the unlikeliest places. As the gathering shifted into easy conversation, Jack moved to a newly built wall near the office door. From under his arm, he unfolded the old jacket, worn thin, stitched at the elbows, stubbornly intact. He smoothed it once, then hammered a small hook into the wall and hung it up with quiet reverence. The jacket sagged under its own weight, but it didn't look tired. It looked triumphant. A symbol of the night kindness refused to die in the cold. Laughter rippled across the hangar as a small radio crackled to life, playing an old folk tune that spoke of home and roads less traveled. Kids chased each other between folding tables loaded with pies and crock-pots. Someone started handing out paper plates piled high with mashed potatoes and stuffing. Jack turned, scanning the room until his eyes found Ellie's. Across the crowd, across the soft blur of snow beginning to fall outside the hangar doors, their gazes locked. No words passed between them. None were needed. As snow falls softly outside, Ellie and Jack share a look, not rushed, not forced, but filled with quiet promise. In a battered hangar filled with laughter and second chances, a man once lost to hardship found his place among new beginnings. Sometimes, a single act of kindness, a jacket given without hesitation, can mend not just broken engines, but broken hearts. Like a small light in a long winter night, true compassion finds its way back to those who dare to give it freely. And perhaps, if we look closely, we'll see that every act of quiet goodness carries the seed of a life forever changed.